Welcome to the 501 Companion Podcast. If it sounds like I'm out of practice, it's because I am. The 501 Podcast is an educational and news podcast/vodcast for 501c3 charitable organizations that want to create better content, optimize their technology, and improve their marketing to better serve their customers. This is episode 28, and we're recording on May 6th. And I sound a little bit off because I'm on vacation. In fact, that'll be one of the topics that we talk about. But first, let me tell you who we are. My name is Buddy Sclera. I'm the Chief Content Officer and the host of the 501 Companion Podcast. My career has been focused on digital marketing, social media, and emerging technologies like component content systems and NFTs. I'm also a professional writer working and teaching the craft and business of making comics. I'm joined by Sandy Miniutti, the Chief Operating Officer at Family Promise. She's a versatile nonprofit executive with 20 plus years of extensive experience in PR, marketing, fundraising, and strategic planning. She's deeply committed to advancing a vibrant and healthy philanthropic marketplace in which charities have the necessary skills and resources to solve our community's most pressing issues. Sandy, welcome back to the show after both of us have been on some sort of vacation.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be back.
I think what I'd like to do in this episode with you is, talk about the reflections that we've had and observations of the guests that you've brought in for us to talk with. I think it has changed the texture of the show, dive a little bit into our vacation and how it helps us, and then do a quick reveal with you to show you where our new branding is going. How does that sound?
Sounds perfect.
All right. So, when you joined, it was the perfect time. We had just completed season 1. It was Matt, Nick, me interviewing other heads of charities, and we were just working our way along the way. And then we brought in a true expert, and that was you. And you have this massive network. And one of the things that immediately changed in the show was this level of familiarity with the real challenges of charities. Also, the one thing that I also observed, and then I'll pause for a minute to get your reflection, is the serendipitous nature of people getting into this line of work. That is, nobody majored in this in college. They sort of found it as a calling, and as did you. And I just thought, like, wow, what an interesting part of the background of this important line of work. So I'll pause for a minute just to get your reflections on the first couple of episodes that you helped co-host.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's been great getting to spend time with you again, and also with some of my former peers and coworkers, bringing them onto the program and just spending time talking about something that I truly am passionate about making nonprofits as great as they can be, because really they're the ones out there solving the most pressing problems in our community. I mean, I know that's in my bio, but I really believe that. And anything that we can all do to contribute to the sector to make it better just enables our communities to be better and better serve people and better serve the environment and all those things. So I think it's been fun. And that career path thing is so interesting, right? Tim and I were actually talking yesterday about you can solve problems, whether you're a nonprofit, a for-profit, a blend. That sometimes doesn't even matter what you are if you're committed to making the world a better place and you're doing good business practices if you happen to be a for-profit, and making sure that you're building philanthropy into your systems. And it's so important to employees too, that they have something that they can be committed to and involved in. So I think the marketplace is really changing too, from when I joined 20 years ago to what it is today with B Corps and all these different interesting, innovative models.
Well, the diverse background, none of you have the exact same background, but all of you bring something to your charities that would not on paper necessarily be the first choice. I'm in an industry where you major in something and go into that industry. And I'm sure there's majors for charities and organizations of this nature. And yet all of you found your way in your career at a certain point, it seems like a light bulb went off and you realized this is what your mission is.
Yeah, and I tell people that all the time. A lot of my friends, we're at that point in our life, we're having our little midlife crises, and they keep coming to me and saying that they want to work in the philanthropic sector and they don't know how to break in. And I think it's very true. You don't have to have a background in nonprofits. You have to have a passion, and bringing those professional skills into the nonprofit sector is great. And I always, when I get resumes for positions, I definitely take those candidates as seriously as somebody that maybe has had 20 plus years in the nonprofit sector. I think having diverse voices, which is one of the things boards bring also to the table, is really important.
Well, I think the diversity of background
Mhm.
is what I've observed with the people that you've brought in so far. Their backgrounds serve what the organization needs, and then they have adjusted and learned skills along the way. Something that maybe we wouldn't have seen if we were in regular corporate jobs.
Right?
It just seems like you need to have a level of agility, and every one of the people we spoke with had this level of agility where they just could go with the flow.
Yeah, that's so true when you work in the nonprofit field because you wear many hats. No matter what the size of the organization is, we're always under resourced. So you always have to be willing to do all the things. The executive directors at Family Promise in the field are really jacks of all trades. They're case managing families in crisis. They're having to manage their budget, right? They're small business owners. When the water main breaks, they're cleaning up the flood. They're doing everything. They have to have the skills to present in the community about their organization and woo donors. So yeah, having that agility is key.
And I think that I've seen that with you, even as this show has begun, and you went with the flow and shaped it, and it's been very organic, and I thank you for that,
It's
for
been a lot
making
of
our show
fun.
better. Yeah, I just thank you for that. Now, as part of what I had noted, I'm still on vacation brain, um, and you just came off of vacation as well. We must have been um, sharing thoughts remotely about this idea of how vacation and giving yourself permission to take a break actually makes you better at your job. And you had a very interesting anecdote and some observations, and I've pulled some statistics to back them up. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you've learned about taking a little bit of a break?
I think it's critical to rejuvenate and, especially working in the nonprofit field, a lot of us are exposed to trauma in our jobs on a day-to-day basis, and you need to step away to spend time with your family, to have that self-care. A lot of the coaching we do at Family Promise with people in the field is to talk about that. The case managers and executive directors have to take time away. And that means board members can't be calling them at 2 in the afternoon on their day off, which happens a lot. So we coach board members that way too. And at our national office with our team, we are really regimented about that. When somebody's on PTO, they're not to be checking email, they're not to be calling, like that time is sacred. You really need that time away. I struggle with that. I was in Africa couple years back and I was like, oh, you won't be able to reach me because I'll be out in the bush, like I'll be so far removed. But every time we got to lodge, even though they were campsites, there was Wi-Fi, so I was checking my email. And that's just not, it's not good for the people that work for you because they need a break from you too. So I've had to learn to detox. But the story I was sharing with you is I was at a conference in Texas a few weeks ago with a lot of very entrepreneurial startup nonprofits. It was such a great community to be part of. And a couple of them are really struggling. These dynamic executive directors that were the founders have set policies that 5 or 8 years into the organization's operations, when you're a staff member, you have to take a sabbatical. And so theirs were coming up this summer. One was taking 8 weeks and their nonprofit paid into it. Another one was taking 6 weeks. And they were really struggling with how they were going to step away for that long, but they recognized they needed to do that for their own self, for their families, for the benefit of the organization, and also so that the staff saw that they were doing it so they would feel permitted to do it when it was their turn. So I really commended them for that, but I also felt the sympathy that when you're really passionate about the work, it's hard to step away for that long. But I'd be curious to see what your statistics say.
Yeah, I think the statistics showed an extreme benefit to it. So let me pull up um, some uh, statistics.
I'll have to start
So
using them in my PowerPoints.
yeah, you can take these.
Thank you.
The, there was one statistic that was around specifically about foreign experiences. You talked about traveling to Africa. I did a staycation, although I do prefer to get out. I'm going to read two quotes for you from a professor at the Columbia Business School who noted that foreign experiences increase both cognitive flexibility and depth and integrativeness of thought. And further adds the ability to make deep connections between disparate forms. So that's a word salad, but it comes together in the second part of the quote. And the quote is, the key critical process is multicultural engagement, immersion, and adaptation. I think that's an important word. Someone who lives abroad and doesn't engage with the local culture will likely get less of a creative boost than someone who travels abroad and really engages in the local environment. Now, as I read this, one of the things I think about is I do a staycation, I'm comfortable. I don't that's a different type of getaway. I don't have to think much about it. When you are traveling, when you went to Africa, when I've been to Europe, you're on alert, and you're also observing things that you haven't observed. That is, if you're walking to the train in New York and you just walk past it hundreds of times, it's just
Yeah.
you stop noticing the architecture. But when you go to a different city, especially a foreign city where they speak a different language, you are on alert, and that forces your brain to stop thinking about family promise or whatever else that you're working on, because there's a lot going on. And it says that actually increases the elasticity of your brain, your adaptability goes up, and when you get back to the office, you are truly refreshed because you had to stop thinking about work, because it was a totally different environment that you had to survive in. I thought that was amazingly insightful. What are your thoughts?
I 100% agree. I've always pulled my kids out of school for trips because I think it does the same thing for kids. It really changes their perception of the world. And I just think you can see the actual growth in your children when you travel with them. So I imagine, our brains are a little more set as adults, but something similar, I'm sure, happens with adults. And then you come back and you have a totally different perspective on things. I 100% agree. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, and when you get out and you begin to move, you also exercise. So I actually spent quite a lot of time this break exercising, and I need to get into shape. There's never enough time when I'm working. And I found this very interesting study in a journal, and they were using this concept of an AUT. And a lot of us have probably done it in workshops. And it's this idea that you take a familiar object, and your AUT is, I forget what alternate use. This alternate use test and forces you to think about the different ways that you can use a mundane and familiar object. And they base it off of four things. One is fluency, all the different things you can think of, originality, flexibility, the types of ways, and then elaboration. So you're supposed to do this in a group, not by yourself. So the point of this was when they told one cohort to be sedentary and just stay there and sit in a room and not take a break, and they had another cohort who went out, exercised, walked, they found that the walking group increased their creativity by 81%.
Wow.
81%. That's not like a trivial amount. And then
Yeah.
there were other factors. So it was getting away, even if it's a mini vacation from a brainstorm or a workshop, right? You ever go into what we call a war room?
Yeah.
You leave the war room, but in days where you're like, oh my God, we can't leave the war room. Well, it turns out that you must leave the war room in order to have improved creativity. What were your thoughts on that initial stat there?
I'm thinking I better pivot because we have a full staff retreat coming up, which I'm so excited about, to have everybody together in person finally after a couple of years. And my peer in the organization, we're breaking down into some department meetings during that. She says she's going to have a walking meeting. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to get a room in the hotel and we're going to sit together in these round tables and we're going to brainstorm. And now I'm thinking maybe I should have a walking meeting.
Yeah, isn't it? It's amazing, isn't it?
Some of my staff do that remotely. They will, our regional directors, they have the similar position. They just have different parts of the country. And they will do walking meetings together over the phone and talk about, like, I'm having this challenge. How have you solved it in your region? So I know my staff have already adopted that. Maybe I need to too.
Well, and forced breaks, right? Like mini vacations from even if you do have them at the round table, you must force a break. Even if people are like, "Oh no, this is we're no," you got to force a break, just like you had noted. And I think one of the things that I also thought for my own personal research as I'm going on my journey and trying to exercise more, I'm going to find something here that was very, very interesting. Two great thinkers in history noted that the daily walk was exceptionally important to them. Albert Einstein
Oh yeah,
insisted, right, that he had a daily walk,
yeah.
and he
Can
tried
you
to.
take a nap too?
He forced a nap and a
Yeah.
walk for
Yes.
both of them. Yep.
Yeah.
Two things that I've done exceptionally well on my vacation. Einstein didn't have Netflix, but if he did, he would probably have also said, finish the entire season of Ozark, which I did.
Wow.
Yeah, that's an achievement. I could have got my master's degree or watched Ozark. So I watched Ozark. So he would do 45 minutes. And then interesting to note, and then I'll pause for a second for your reaction. He liked to walk and talk. But Aristotle, the great philosopher, also noted that walking was essential. And he only had walking meetings. And you'll see a lot of illustrations of Aristotle's teachings with his students where they are physically moving. And he felt that there were three things that were inextricably linked, and they were thinking, walking, talking. And I just thought that's a really interesting observation that remains today. What are your thoughts as you hear about Einstein and Aristotle?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, personally, I know for me, I have to exercise every day. I exercise 1 to 2 hours every day. It's usually the first thing I do in the morning before I go to work. I just, my day is off if I don't do that. And I love to walk. It doesn't have to be some power workout or lifting some crazy amount of weights or anything. I really think there's a lot of benefits to walking. I thought it was cool to see during COVID, people were out doing that more. I don't see it as much lately, but yeah, I totally agree. And, it makes you think about our education system and how kids sit in chairs all day. My kids went to a charter school through 8th grade, and a lot of what they would do is take the kids out of the classroom. They had an environmental focus, and so the kids would be outside for class as much as possible. And they'd walk down to a park or they'd go to a farm. They often didn't take buses on field trips. They'd walk a couple miles to something that was interesting to see. So I totally agree with that. I just haven't done well with my team about walking meetings. I'm going to make that a priority.
I had a manager when I worked at a small marketing agency who believed if there was particularly a conflict, and marketing agencies, high intensity, especially around pitch season, he would take us as a team and make us walk together around this extremely long block in Montclair, New Jersey.
Oh,
And it was
it's a
it
good
was
idea.
good. By the time we got back, people had settled down, but also potentially had resolved issues. So it was good for conflict resolution as
Yeah,
well.
that's really interesting. And I know my affiliates do a lot of that work with families, maybe sheltering together that sometimes don't get along, or a family is going through a really traumatic thing. And then, so naturally, you're not going to get along with everybody, maybe the case managers. So they do a lot of conflict resolution. So I don't know that we've explored that kind of opportunity. That's really interesting.
It is interesting, and who knows what it will mean. And sometimes it'll be tangible, sometimes it will be intangible. But it seems like something that is worth trying. It's working for me. It's working for you. I don't have quite the discipline that you have with the exercise. But certainly I feel better after the end of this week. It's been a
You
concerted
refresh.
effort. Yeah, it's been a concerted effort. I have to remind myself, get away from the computer. I mean, as in my bio, I know I build websites, component content systems. I launched a series of NFTs. That's a heck of a lot of time in front of a computer
Yeah,
screen.
yeah, yeah. You got to get out and see the beauty in the world too.
I agree 100%. And speaking of beauty in the world, Sandy, I'm going to unveil to you and to anybody who's watching this video our rebranding,
Awesome.
um, which will um, show you the direction that we are going. Our website, for a long time, has been focused by, let's see, there you go. That's our
Ooh,
new logo.
I love it. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So
I
this
really love that.
Thank you. So, Matt Balo, who is our Chief Technology Officer, led the effort to get a new logo designed, and then what interpretations for use. As you can see, top left corner there, that's going to be with a black background. The probably right corner where my mouse is, you can see that the three forms a heart, and we focus on C3,
That's
501c3, and
cool.
then look up. Yeah, it's very clean. It's very modern. We are in the process now of
Ooh,
dimensionalizing our brand guide, and
nice.
then our website will follow behind that.
That's beautiful. I love it. Yeah, I
Yeah,
saw the heart right away, and I agree. It's clean. It communicates what you do pretty quickly, and what your positioning is, and it's modern. I love it. That's really
thank you.
cool.
Yeah, so for
And I
those
love
who
that you're
are
gonna have a brand guide.
Yeah, we're gonna have a brand guide, and for those just
That's
listening
great.
on audio, the materials will be on the website. So going forward, we will start to share that out a little bit more, change the avatar on our Twitter account, the whole works.
Great.
Now, speaking of Twitter, I certainly have noticed increased activity from you from the early days, where in the first episode, you actually couldn't even remember your Twitter account, but
So
you
embarrassing.
are
My
now
social
like.
media person at work was ready to kill me.
Yeah, yeah, but you're doing great now. I am so excited and impressed. What was the adjustment that you made? What are you doing
I
now?
think it's a lot of what you were talking about. It's getting up and out of like the regular routine. I've had the opportunity to go to a lot of events, some of them virtual, a lot of them in person, and that just inspires you. I love hearing little snippets from people that confirm things that I believe, and then I like to share that, or new things that I learn. So I think that's a lot of what I've been posting is quotes from other people, that I've been coming across. But yeah, it's getting up and getting out of my comfort zone really has been what's inspired me.
the the basic principle, and I'll use Twitter because it is the dominant platform. The basic principle that is really important to note is never before in the history of humankind have we all been able to get on the same exact platform at the same time at zero cost and share ideas. And there's everything from presidents to celebrities to sports stars to just thinkers. And this is huge. We all have the exact same shared platform, and it's free.
Yeah.
So it's easy to sit out and hard to be consistent. At the same time, it is an opportunity that I don't want to look back on when my grandchildren say, oh, wow, you were there at the birth of Twitter. What were you doing? And I don't want to be saying, well, nothing, because I wasn't sure if it was going to take off or not. You don't
Yeah,
have to like it or not, but it can be argued that the last two presidencies were won and lost on Twitter. You don't have to
yeah,
like the presidents,
yeah,
but they were one. I think say that Twitter was an extremely important platform.
yeah. And we talked about some of this at the conference I was at in Texas that, um, it's like the 80-20 thing. 20% of the people are controlling 80% of the conversation. So, and a lot of people sit out because they don't want to offend anybody. And, whatever position you take on anything, I think you're right. It's so critical that we all share because I personally believe at the end of the day, most of us see things very similarly. Um, in terms of morality and ethics and values, and really want the world to be a better place. Maybe we have different ideas about how to go about it. And I think it's important that everybody's sharing their point of view, because otherwise there's just a few people really controlling the conversation. So I've been trying to take that to heart as well and share my point of view as well more.
Well, and trust in the media has constantly gone up and down. But I majored in journalism. I started off as a newspaper reporter.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So as we see that industry has changed dramatically,
So much.
that is so much more of news is generated by unpaid journalists who are doing it for passion. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's better journalism, but I think important aspect of it is number one, when it comes to elected leaders, you actually hear directly from them, and sometimes it counters how they were quoted. They'll say, well, actually what I really said was this. Second is, what you're doing at Family Promise will not make the New York Times in general unless something egregiously bad happens. So the way to communicate with people who are interested in what you're doing, one of those platforms is Twitter. You can't do a newsletter every day. You wouldn't have the energy for that, but you can share a quick link so that people can jump to it. And I think that utilizing this platform for what it is, which is keeping in touch with your cohort and listening to others, is an essential tool in the business world.
Actually, Tim and I were talking about this yesterday, and that we were talking about flourishing and how a lot of the work we do at Family Promise is specific to the individual family. Like every family that comes to us has different needs, different combination of needs. And it also has to derive from that, because everybody's happiness is going to be different, and what excites them and what skills they bring to community is different. And we were saying, like our children have such amazing opportunities to do whatever they want now, that all these side gigs, like I couldn't have imagined that when I was coming out of college, because my first time I had an email was at my first job. Like these avenues didn't exist. And now with things like Twitter and Facebook, you can roll up a company overnight and start marketing it without having, unfortunately, maybe for you to go to a big firm and spend lots of advertising money. So it's such an interesting new world where everybody can really explore their personal passions and talents. And I think it's really cool. It's disruptive, right? It's changed a lot of industries, but it's cool, and it's great for nonprofits because we don't need necessarily United Way anymore to talk to potential donors. We can reach those donors directly now, which I think is so compelling.
And your donors can give you feedback as well. The few times where we've seen tweets and retweets of people who liked an episode of the podcast or something else that I'm working on gives you some signals. Maybe it's not the only signal, but it gives you some signals, and that's an important aspect of where we're going in the future. And that brings us to the end, and a nice catch up with you. I think we're going to go back to some guests in the coming episodes. We'll tap into your vast network. Are you excited for that?
I am. And I met a lot of cool people down in Texas that I think would be great guests. So, yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. Listen, between your existing network and your always growing network, I feel like there's no limit.
Yeah. We'll have some more fun.
We will. And speaking of, where can they find you on social media?
I think my Twitter handle is at Sandra Miniutti. I think I got that down now. I'm pretty busy on LinkedIn too. And Family Promise is at familypromise.org.
Incidentally, I'm linked with you on LinkedIn, and I think what you've been doing is great. On Twitter, you are sharing information and using that platform, but then on LinkedIn, I saw some real engagement and some photos, and it looks like you're revving up attention there. So well done on both platforms.
Thank you. Thank you.
And let me see, where the heck am I? You can always find me at Buddy Scalera everywhere. So my website is Buddy Scalera. My Twitter is Buddy Scalera, and all of those different platforms. And you can also find me and this podcast at the 501c3lookup.org website. We hope that you enjoyed the 501 Companion podcast and consider subscribing so you never miss an episode. If you have any questions, show ideas, or are part of a charitable organization that wants to be on the show, visit the 501c3lookup.org website. You'll find our contact information, a complete list of our previous episodes, and of course, the extensive and free resources of the 501c3lookup.org website. Thank you for joining us on the 501 Companion Podcast. We hope you join us again next week for the information and inspiration to take your charitable mission to the next level.